Hi, I'm Brian Hanf, and today we're going to talk about how a challenger can beat an incumbent. It's not easy, and the research from Banks and Hewitt show us that only 7% of challengers beat incumbents, so incumbents are winning 93% of the time. It takes financing, strategy, and tactics to overcome them, so we're going to talk a little bit about all those things today. When financing is a factor, it's not always a factor. When it is a factor, it's usually very spectacular. Strategy, we're going to talk about the fundamentals of strategy. And then tactics, we're going to talk about how when they're creative and surprising, they're usually the most effective. So overcoming the incumbent generally is more about other things than money, but again, when it is money, it's usually very spectacular. An example of that is Michael Huffington in 1992 ran in a primary and spent $5 million to defeat the incumbent in a primary. A very unheard of tactic, and it was. But when we look at the research, we look at the experts like Ron Fox. He talks about how 2-to-1 advantage generally is not enough. In a smaller race, like a congressional race, $5 million was enough. But if we look at another example, again, Michael Huffington, a couple of years later, in 1994, runs for U.S. Senate and spends $29 million of his own money and loses that election. It was a very close race, but he still ended up losing it. So a 2-to-1 ratio, when it's a smaller race, is usually enough, but when you get larger, it probably isn't enough. So, one of the other things that we look at is strategy, and we talk about the principles of strategy. When you build your strategy, look at the candidate's strength. Use that as an advantage. Keep the objective in focus. Be on the offensive with your strategy. Be simple, though, and use as little resources as possible. Be efficient. Make sure you have many strategies. So for an endorsement, for a primary, for the general, they should all have their own mini strategies, but encompassed in the overall total strategy as well. There should also be unity of command. The campaign manager should be in charge so that the tasks don't overlap, and so you are doing things efficiently. And of course, use the element of surprise in your strategy as well. Now, some tactics that we see out there in the current election cycle, 2010 election cycle. Looking at David Vitter, vitterforsenate.com on their website, he's got a little timer, a clock, counting up from the last time that his challenger, a representative from his state, when the last time that they had a town hall meeting. Now, David Vitter is the incumbent in this case, but this is typically a tactic used by the challengers, is to show how out of touch the incumbent is and how they're not responding to constituent needs. So it's a very effective tactic, showing that. And of course, if the member of the House of Representatives holds a town meeting, they can take video of them and show that, saying something or doing something that shows that they're out of touch to continue that strategy while using a different tactic. And then, of course, I kind of think of one of the all-time classic moves. In 1988, I'm reminded by Doc Swetzer that George Bush, then Vice President George Bush, went to Boston Harbor and feigned his surprise at all the pollution in the harbor. Now, his challenger was the governor of the state, Michael Dukakis. And so this really kind of put Dukakis on his heels, in his home state, and attacking him on an area that Dukakis was supposedly the leader of, being an environmentalist, lifetime environmentalist, all of a sudden getting this charge that he wasn't doing enough for the environment. Really kind of put him back on his heels. So, again, with 7% of challengers winning, you do need to be creative, you do need to use strategy, and you do need to have money in order to win, because incumbents do win 93% of the time. So again, the experts suggest use the principles of strategy and build a winning campaign. So let's take a question from the audience here.
What strategy tactics might we use against someone in our own party who is more liberal or conservative than us as a challenger for the endorsement or primary?
Well, that's a great question. depending on if it is a general or if it is an endorsement or a primary, you're going to use a little something different, but the strategy is the same. You're going to show how the incumbent is not really a member of the party core or adheres to the party principles. You're going to do this through the votes that they've taken or the bills that they've signed. You're going to do this through speeches that they've given, excerpts or video of speeches that they've given, highlighting where they have veered off of the core principles of the party. You're going to use that. Another tactic you could use besides video or these votes in mailing might be one-on-one telephone calls with delegates if it's an endorsement, where you can really talk about the nuances of how this person is not part of the core party structure, doesn't represent the party well. Primary, you can still use a telephone, but it's not going to be quite so nuanced. It's a slightly different tactic there. But again, the strategy is the same, showing that how they don't believe in the core values of the party. Next question.
How much money should a challenger raise to be competitive?
Well, that's a great question. A challenger should typically look back at the previous elections, and whoever spent the most in the last cycle or two, try to raise about 60% of those funds 60 days before the election. And that should give you enough time to use that money for your media if you need to buy television or radio ads, or do direct mail, or just organize get out the vote efforts and that kind of thing. And hopefully you're building momentum during that whole time, so you do have some more additional funds down the road. But I think that answers the question. So thank you for your time.